And as always, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this space. As many of you know, I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Coalition for the UN We Need. And in all of my capacities, it has been a real delight to work with the Global Governance Innovation Forum, Global Governance Innovation Network since its inception in 2021. The BIC, of course, is committed, as always, to bringing together diverse perspectives, better understand the world as it is, and to push the envelope on what we can achieve at this time. And this, of course, requires the bringing together of many different kinds of parties, member states, UN officials, civil society, think tanks. We're all welcome here. And these multi-stakeholder dialogues are always more successful when they're grounded in evidence-based research and what I like to call positive accountability. So that's more like the accountability that parents have to their children, and maybe less like the accountability that we see in the adversarial spaces that exist sometimes. And of course, where we're working in partnership writ large. So naturally, this is something we'll continue to do. We've always done, and we look forward to our future collaboration in this regard. And with that, I'm really delighted to hand the floor over to Richard and welcome you once again to this space. And I look forward to learning over the course of the next hour. Richard.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you to you and your colleagues from the Baha'i International Community for kindly hosting this dialogue today on taking the Summit of the Future agenda forward, facilitating implementation through dialogue, research, and monitoring. I'm Richard Ponzio from the Stimson Center in Washington, D.C., and wish to welcome our distinguished participants both online from around the world and here in New York during UNGA Week, still going on, and it's such a busy time. So let me begin first by just from the bottom of our hearts thanking all of you for making the time to be with us this crucial week and a few days after the summit. Stimson Center has partnered on this initiative with some of our favorite partners for many years now. Professor Ibram Kumbari, you'll meet soon, from the Savannah Centre for Diplomacy, Democracy and Development. My right, Mayara Foley from Plataforma CIPÓ, the Global Challenges Foundation, all keen supporters of what is called the Global Governance Innovation Network. It's been around now for shortly over 3 years. And then our partner from the Kingdom of the Netherlands, who will be introducing a representative shortly. As it relates to today's dialogue, the Global Governance Innovation Network, which was inspired by a major event, the UN 75 Global Governance Forum back in 2020, just a few short years ago. Remember UN 75? Brings together world-class scholarship with international policymaking to address fundamental global governance challenges, threats, and opportunities. Seizing on what is viewed, I think, especially by those in this room and online, as a generational opportunity provided by this past week's summit, our program today is focused on 3 areas that the co-conveners view as essential to fully leveraging the summit's comprehensive action agenda, namely track 1.5 policy dialogues, secondly, policy research, and thirdly, robust monitoring in support of this multi-stakeholder universe, the UN, partners from civil society, the business community, and of course, the Secretariat, member states, and increasingly so, something that many of us felt was one of the most special outcomes from the last few months. In fact, the UN 75, UN Civil Society Conference in support of the Summit of the Future in Nairobi, and the advent of 20 new multi-stakeholder impact coalitions that many of us are active in supporting. We really hope that this discussion over the next hour can really help to inform and advance the work of the impact coalitions. For today's program, we're going to operate under the Chatham House rule, and consequently, the brief summary that we'll be producing with some ideas for the way ahead will be on a not for attribution basis. We'll each have a chance to see this and give your thoughts before we go public with it. And at the same time, we're recording the session strictly for note-taking purposes. Please kindly note that one of the biggest friends of this community, Maria Fernanda Espinoza, not a surprise, called by the COP climate ministers for a last-minute discussion, and it started about half an hour ago. She's hoping to catch us before we conclude over the next hour. And also, we're sad that from our key partner, the Netherlands, the Deputy Prime Minister of Saint Martin could not be with us at the antimicrobial resistance discussion that's going on, one of the top issues this week here in New York. But in his place, we're very, very pleased to have from the island of Aruba, the Director General of Foreign Affairs for Aruba of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Ms. Jocelyn Kroos, join us. And also to kick off today's discussion, we're going to jump over the lead-off remarks because of a very important address by the Prime Minister of the Netherlands coming up within this hour. So we're so thankful that you could take the time and to be one of our partners for today's discussions. Ms. Kroos, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, distinguished colleagues, partners, and guests. It is an honor to be here as we look towards the existential next steps in the implementation of the Summit of the Future's outcome documents, particularly the Declaration of the Future Generations, co-facilitated by the Kingdom of the Netherlands and Jamaica. By integrating the outcome documents into the very fabric of policymaking and governance structures, we can move from dialogue to decisive action. The implementation of these commitments demands a whole of government approach. Meaningful youth participation and engagement from civil society, organizations, and the private sector. When it comes to future generations, we cannot allow another generation to pass with the status quo in policymaking. The 20 multi-stakeholder impact coalitions created during the successful UN Civil Society Conference held in Nairobi in May 2024, including the Future Generations Coalition, can serve as vehicles to drive the commitments made during the summit forward, bridging the gap between international agreements and local action. Young people have also mobilized around the Summit of the Future, engaging in dialogue with member states and offering invaluable insights. A key element in ensuring the success of the summit's commitments is addressing the outdated international financial infrastructure. This system, designed for a different era, must be reformed to meet the realities of today's global challenges. It must become fit for purpose, representative of all countries, not just a few, and inclusive of voices of the global South, particularly, as in our case, small island development states, which are disproportionately affected by global crisis. Achieving tangible progress on this front is essential for empowering vulnerable nations and ensuring that no one is left behind in our global financial systems. In conclusion, where there is a path before us that holds the promise of real progress for future generations, let us not lose momentum. The Kingdom of the Netherlands, alongside Jamaica, stands ready to do its part in bringing the declaration to life. And we are excited to collaborate with other interested member states in creating a group of friends for future generations here at the UN. This group will be crucial in maintaining momentum and fostering cooperation towards safeguarding our shared future. By continuing to collaborate through multi-stakeholder engagement, impact coalition, group of friends, and follow-up mechanisms, we can ensure that the outcome documents of the Summit of the Future become catalysts for a more equitable, sustainable, and just world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kroos. And if you can also use this opportunity, first of all, thank you for partnering on today's program, but your ambassador and your entire team here in New York at the mission of the Netherlands to the United Nations, the leadership you showed with the country of Jamaica, who we hope to have a representative join us today on the Declaration on Future Generations, was standout and exceptional in every way, and we're deeply thrilled to be a partner with Ambassador Joke Brandt and your colleagues here in New York. Now we will go to the normal agenda. Please kindly note for all speakers, kindly ask 3 minutes and you will get a note from Nidar Yusuf, a short prompt with 30 seconds to go. But at this time, we'll begin with our lead-off speakers, and you have it on your agenda, the background. He's well known in our community, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, a mentor and post-grad for so many of us here today. And just to note that the Savannah Centre really made a remarkable contribution to the Summit of the Future preparations early this year, hosting scholars NGO advocates, and leaders from the African Union, from various regional economic communities, and of course, the UN in Abuja, the Africa Summit of the Future Dialogue, leading to a new community of scholars working on these issues. Professor Gambari, welcome.
Well, thank you, Richard. If Richard invites you to something, please regard it as an order. There's no point even declining because you get it. So I want to thank him and also distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Also welcome on my right the Chargé d'Affaires of the Nigerian Permanent Mission to the United Nations, because otherwise I would have had to speak for the whole of Africa on this round, which is too much even for me. This last week's UN Summit of the Future has offered the community of nations a historic opportunity to adopt several far-reaching, high-impact global governance innovations. As we are exploring in today's conversation, the summit's success also hinges on a robust, closely monitored follow-up effort championed by developing and developed countries alike to support the concrete actions and commitments adopted at the summit. And I know this, because I was ambassador of my country, United Nations, when we thought General Assembly of 1975, what was that? The 1980, I think it's about 95 would be the time, but then all the commitments made were not followed through. So I wish to use my brief lead-off remarks to emphasize the importance of continued multi-stakeholders track 1.5 quality dialogues for better understanding of the state of the play in progressing on the summit's follow-through, but also crucially offering concrete advice and timely ideas to policymakers seeking to flesh particular actions and commitments made in the summit's three main instruments, as well as to propose corrective actions to tackle head-on inevitable bottlenecks and indeed potential spoilers into progress. Fortunately, the independent research institutions here that collectively make up global governance innovations network, including my own Savannah Centre based in Abuja, Nigeria, have been conducting a series of more than a dozen tracks, 1.5 policy dialogues in the lead-up to this past week's summit. For my remaining time, I wish to underscore a few key recommendations, in particular from our African Summit of the Future Dialogue hosted at Savannah Centre in March 4 to 6 here in Abuja, Nigeria, along with key partners, Stimson Center, and 18 other African and global partner organizations. Our dialogue in Abuja brought together, the theme was the Africa we want and the United Nations that we need. And it brought together some 80 leading African and international scholars and policy advocates to engage with policymakers from the United Nations system, from the African Union, the Economic Committee of West Africa, known as ECOWAS, in 5 carefully co-facilitated thematic working groups in the areas of 1, peace, security, and defense; 2, sustainable development and democratic governance; 3, human rights and humanitarian action; 4, family governance; and finally, a rules-based world order, which, in the words of a former president of Nigeria, President Babangida, he said, a rules-based world order must be collectively defined, collectively designed, and collectively defended. That's how you keep rules. And that's how its legitimacy and applicability will endure. And of course, Africa's place in global governance. I commend to those of you who are brave enough to read our report on that one, which is comprises 60-page, 60-page report, with detailed and forward-looking recommendations from an African perspective. But in the interest of time, let me simply mention 2 sets of ideas briefly that I believe will be critical to advancing effective follow-through this past week's summit. The first, in the area of peace and security, our African dialogue recommended that the Security Council should be democratized, including by establishing 2 new permanent seats for African countries, which in my view is quite consistent with the Pact for the Future language in Article 4. I understand also the United States has made a proposal that actually include the expansion of the Security Council, both categories, including especially the 2 seats, permanent seats for Africa. Secondly, the UN must make full funding for peacekeeping operations a priority, including support of both African Union-led missions and hybrid peace operations led jointly by the United Nations. And finally, in the area of climate governance and consistent with the Pact's call in Action 10 to quote, strengthen international cooperation for the environment, our participants recommended the creation of a new UN agency with 3 main components, namely a World Environmental Board, an associated environmental assembly consisting of parliamentary representatives, and thirdly, a research community network. Together, all these 3 components will facilitate a wider grassroots outreach and participation. I look forward very much to engaging on these and related issues this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Gambari, for your leadership and lifelong commitment to the work of the UN over the years. Now I'm pleased to introduce our colleague, Mayara Foley. I think everybody can hear everybody speaking in this room, but we have people online, so kindly speak a little louder than you normally would, please.
Thank you, Richard. Well, as a good Brazilian, I decided to start my remarks by quoting a recent speech that President Lula has delivered in a recent G20 meeting in Rio, where he said, "In the 21st century, nothing is as absurd and unacceptable as the persistence of hunger and poverty, considering that we have so many scientific and technological resources and the artificial intelligence revolution at our disposal. Hunger is not only the result of external factors, it is mainly the result of political choices." And I decided to read this quote because I think it captures really well how politics or geopolitics are often the center of the inability that we have to deliver on global challenges like climate change, poverty, health emergencies, etc. And in the case of the elimination of hunger, which is the goal of Action 3 of the Pact to the Future, it is estimated that we need around $40 billion every year up to 2030 to eliminate hunger. And it might sound like a big figure, but it's just a tiny, tiny fraction of the $2.4 trillion, which was the global military spending last year alone. So again, the discrepancy between those 2 figures show that it's often not a matter of resources, it's a matter of prioritization and political will. So I think as we're here trying to discuss how can we implement the commitments, principles, and ambitions of the Pact of the Future, what we need to be answering is how can we generate the political will to mobilize the resources that are necessary to implement the Pact. And I think that's how groups like our Global Governance Innovation Network can add value. And the Pact is, it's long, it's 40 pages. We won't be able to strike all of those commitments, but I think what we can do and will do is certainly select a few priorities and most importantly, identify who are the member states and the actors that we can hopefully work together to implement those priorities. And it's very good to be sitting here next to Ambassador Cozendei because we believe that Brazil has been quite crucial in taking a lead on a lot of the aspects of the Pact, from the initiative on tackling poverty and hunger within the G20, but also now the taxation agenda, where Brazil's leadership is being very important both in the G20 and the UN. So I just wanted to put Plataforma CIPÓ and the GIF at your disposal, as we have so many member states here, to try to select those priorities and make sure that we can, as our colleague from the Netherlands said, localize some of those high-level ambitions of the Pact and the Summit of the Future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayra, and thank you for Plataforma CIPÓ's leadership, not only in this process leading up to the Summit of the Future, but the next 2 months, the G20 Summit happening in Mayra's country of Brazil, and we'll be eager to hear Ambassador Cozendei's remarks shortly, building on what many see as some of the most historic comments by a world leader, President Lula, at the opening of the General Assembly. At this time, we have one final kickoff, leadoff speaker among key partners of the Global Governance Innovation Network community, Ms. Maya Groff of the Climate Governance Commission, please.
Thank you so much, Richard, and lovely to be here with you. I'll just offer a few perspectives from the Climate Governance Commission on the importance, really, indeed, of grounded, connected policy research. These track 1.5 policy dialogues and the monitoring, hopefully, that will all cooperate on together as we go further into the future, supporting implementation. And the Climate Governance Commission itself is now in implementation phase of its key proposals. We published a report in advance of COP28 last year. We have a top 10 near-term policy proposals and top 5 medium-term global governance proposals. And we think those two tracks should be worked on in parallel. What do we need to do urgently to enhance our current environmental climate architecture? And then how do we start to think about next generation architecture? So we think that the pact, its adoption and its companion documents is an extremely positive sign for the international community, despite challenges. This is very, very hopeful. And we also see in the context of our work, we've been touching base with various states, civil society experts, policy think tanks around the world. Plataforma CIPÓ, for example, has been a partner from the beginning, the World Resource Institute in Africa, et cetera, et cetera. So we find that there's quite a number of hooks in the pact that we will take forward to refine with further policy research and use the different parts and the very rich document of the pact as a springboard for various governance enhancements, including, for example, elevating UNEP. How do we really elevate the current architecture and make sure it's connected front and center in the international architecture? The emergency platform idea that the Secretary General could convene, we understand that language, of course, was not ultimately adopted, but there's still obviously hooks there. How can we defragment the international system in the context of a veritable planetary emergency to start focusing the energies and connecting the secretariats and UN agencies to really, grapple with this crossroads in history, as Secretary General has really highlighted. Also, the International Court of Justice is referenced. How do we build further international rule of law? I'm based in The Hague, devoted international lawyer. I think there's really a lot of room there. Future generations envoy, and then absolutely future international financial architecture enhancement. And we're working with partners on that as part of the puzzle to also tackle, of course, our environmental challenges. So I'll stop there and say thanks to Richard Nudara for all the excellent work of the Global Governance Innovation Network and all of the global policy dialogues. Our first meeting was back in 2019 at Ban Ki-moon's Global Green Growth Institute, and that really kicked us off. So looking forward to further partnerships.
Thank you, Maya. And we'll hopefully have one of the commission co-chairs, Maria Fernanda Espinosa, join us later in today's program. At this time, we're going to hear from the government representatives around the table on your thoughts on the themes, contributions that scholars and policy researchers can make to the follow through. And we're also, of course, hoping that what you've just heard from some of our leadoff speakers will inspire further discussion. First, we would like to hear, as mentioned earlier, Ambassador Kazunde, who is the Vice Minister for Multilateral and Political Affairs from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Government of Brazil. Welcome. Oh, sorry, I should have noticed. Take your time.
Doesn't count towards the 3 minutes.
No, thank you. I'll just talk briefly about the pact. I think the main message there from our perspective was not that much, although it's important, the contents, but the fact that you can have 193 countries, despite the difficulties in the adoption and some disassociation, around the idea that the UN is important and has a future. I think that key message is a very important result that we have. Then I think the idea was never to tackle every important issue in the world. It was to select some key issues for the future, especially those that did not have yet been necessarily well developed, and I think it was also successful in defining a scope of issues that are important and that need more attention and more development there. I think there are some areas where, although many countries tried real hard to make it something about everything and everywhere at the same time, but I think we managed to keep it focused in some important issues. Some of them is kind of reassurances about sustainable development and so on, but some others are really areas where things are happening and we need to pay attention and develop, like the digital area and the digital compact, like the youth part. And there, I think the declaration on future generation is very interesting in the sense that, although the concept is not new, this idea of future generation that is not yet born, I think the idea that you have to incorporate that perspective in designing the present policies is very interesting, very absent from policy making. The idea that you need to incorporate systematically a long-term perspective. I hope not only the part of incorporating that in UN activities, but also that countries will be able to incorporate that vision in their planning, in their budgets, and so on. And finally, you have the governance part. Again, not many spectacularly new things in the pact, some gradual advances here and there. But again, the important part is virtual consensus on the need of reform. Now, there's many views about which reform and where to go and how to do it. A lot of caution here and there. So President Lula likes to be bold, so he went through directly to the center of the issue. So in the G20 meeting, in his speech in the General Assembly, he designed more or less what would we like to have in a sense. And there, of course, it's very good to think about our wishes. And so we thought, well, everybody says UN has 3 pillars, so security, development, and human rights. But then you have one Security Council, one ECOSOC, which should be a sustainable development council, not a social and economic development only on these days. And then you don't have a human rights council properly situated. You have a Security Council, but it's under the General Assembly. Then you have the General Assembly that puts everybody together. So it should be on top of everybody. It should be the general body that directs and that has the most power in the institution, in a way, the constituent power of the institution. And then you have the Peace Building Commission, which was created some time ago, and that we think should have also a special value. But then it would need to be linked both to the sustainable development and to the Security Council. Today, it is linked in a certain way to the ECOSOC, to the Security Council, but it's still kind of a strange body within the UN that should be more valued and used with more emphasis. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have a country calling a conference to donate for a certain country. It should be on the Peace Building Commission. It's done for it to mobilize resources for specific. So in the G20 meeting, President Lula not only mentioned those general ideas, but said, well, why shouldn't we call a conference to review the charter? That has never been called. It was tried once, it didn't work. Maybe it's time to do it. It's the logical step. Is it realistic? Is it possible? That's what you want to check. You launched the idea, and now it's up to you to discuss it, to brew it, and to bring it to different countries. Certainly, those in power don't like the idea. I mean, that no one wants to change when they are the ones who do it. But I think everybody says things are changed, new realities, and so on. That's the logical consequence of that.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and be looking forward to the next few weeks in the run-up to the G20 in Rio, and the passing of the baton soon to South Africa, and then the first African G20 with the AU being a member as of this time last year. I'm very pleased now to introduce Ms. Cornelia Jarasch, a close friend of civil society throughout the process leading of the Summit of the Future from the Ministry of Germany to the United Nations, where she was part of the engine room team along with her counterpart from the government of Namibia, Audrey Gatana, who really played key roles in supporting your PRs as COFAX of the Pact for the Future. Cornelia, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard, and thank you for organizing this. It's very timely. We are all still a little bit tired, but I think it's good not to lose a minute with starting with follow-up and implementation and not just sitting there and think, oh, we have a pact now. I'm also still in this position. I'm now talking the first time as Germany again, and after talking for 2 years only as for the co-facilitator. So I'm also trying to make this transition. I just wanted to have one remark when we worked on this follow-up paragraph. We had it in very early, and I think even in the zero draft, there was a lot of discussion about it. If we need a follow-up, if it has to be very detailed. Some wanted it much earlier and then more stricter, and a report by the Secretary General. When we put the document under silence the first time, we were super surprised that this was one of the very few paragraphs where silence was not broken. No, we will have a pact with the Security Council reform, because that was done, and a follow-up and nothing else. So, but we are very happy that we have this, and I think as it is a little bit vague, like a lot of things in the pact, we all have to work on it now to make this work. So as Germany, I want to mention 4 elements of the pact that and streams that we would like to pick and where we would like to show some leadership. One, and also some events that already build on the pact. So one is already taking place in 2 weeks. It's called the Hamburg Sustainability Conference. It's something very new. It has never taken place. It's a little bit like a sustainable development Munich Security Conference, so just for sustainable development. It is organized by the Ministry of Economic Cooperation together with UNDP in Hamburg, but there is a very strong input from civil society and from private economy. And it is really about looking at some elements of the pact and taking concrete initiatives out of it. So it was on purpose that it takes place now, like 2 or 3 minutes, 2 or 3 weeks after the pact. And we will have to see it. It is planned to take place at least 3 years in a row. And we hope to also implement with this one, this kind of networked multilateralism that we all have in mind. So the next element that we are having in mind is the Peace Building Commission. Brazil is chairing the commission, and I think Germany is announcing today in the ministerial meeting that we will take over the chair in January. So we are definitely working, have already been very involved in peace building, in the Peace Building Commission, donor of the Peace Building Fund. And I think next year will be quite exciting because we have the Peace Building Review coming up. So this will have co-facilitators. It will not be us, definitely, I can promise. But of course, as chair of the Peace Building Commission, we are looking, of course, very closely, and we are very interested in what can we do to build and to place this really important part a little bit better in the system, because there is so much you can do with the commission. And then the commission already does very well, like working with other stakeholders, working with the international financial institutions that others can also learn from. So the third element that we are looking at is the peacekeeping. There is also a lot going on. With the next peacekeeping ministerial will take place in Berlin in May 2025. And there comes in what you said, Richard, how important it is to have good research. So at the moment, the Secretariat has already tasked a study on peacekeeping and peacekeeping models. This is not the study that we have tasked with the pact. This will be broader, but this will definitely feed in the peacekeeping ministerial, but also feed in this broader study. And I think it's a crucial element of the reform to have a better idea how we can develop further the peacekeeping part. And the fourth element, and there I come back to the beginning, and who is doing what in the follow-up? I think this is an important question that we should all discuss. I think definitely the PGA and the PGA's office will have a crucial role in this. There will be a German PGA coming in the 80th session, and we will make sure she will know how important the follow-up will be. and to take all these tricks together somehow.
Great point
Thank
to end
you.
on. I was going to mention myself how much we're looking forward to Germany's continued leadership on these issues in the years ahead. At this time, we're pleased to welcome Ms. Freya Jackson, coming in from London as the Director of the Multilateral Affairs and Human Rights with the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Freya.
Thank you very much. And let me start by thanking you and Daniel and all colleagues for bringing us together. Beautiful room as well. I can't believe after 20 years of multilateralism, I've never been in this building. Gonna be back.
You're not alone.
Many gains we get from these gatherings, right? I think it's worth reflecting really, as many other people have, quite what has been achieved. And I'll be honest, I think we were skeptical at times going through this process whether we would actually get there and what we would get out of this, given, quite how difficult the geopolitical frictions have been across the piece. And so I think it really is worth, firstly, a massive thank you to our co-facilitators for steering that really complicated path. And then on behalf of everybody else who is fed into that, country, civil society, and all the other groupings. So firstly, pat on the back. I think we genuinely think that the pact and the compact and the declaration on future generations set out some, really ambitious actions, not across every single aspect. We can all, you strive for the stars, right? And then you get happy that you've hit some things on the way, but there are some really genuinely new, and I think everyone would agree, some really valuable aspects that if we can deliver them, will genuinely turbocharge our success, let's hope, assume, on the SDGs, and also on protecting human rights and reinvigorating the multilateral system more broadly. And let's be honest, and I think we can all be honest, the multilateral system needs some reinvigoration, right? And a core part of my job is to try and find a way forward on some of that. I think it's also a testament to all delegations for negotiating a text that gets to that level of ambition and hopefully of unity. I was nervous walking into the room on Sunday morning, I'll be honest, as I think many were, but we got there. I think the key point of the pact is also that it provides pointers of what should be achieved in other forums. And again, much to the point that is being discussed here, how this moves out to international financial system reform, how it touches on COP and indeed on G20, where our Brazilian colleague has also highlighted the work going on there. Inevitably, the critical test will come 12 months, 24 months down the line when we look back and say, has this genuinely made a difference? Have we genuinely followed through? Or have we driven it into the sand by deciding outside the room that maybe it's all a bit too difficult? So the task before us is to work in genuine collaboration across all partners to deliver these commitments and to make the ambitions a reality. I was very struck I was at an open government partnership event first thing this morning, and I thought, walking into the room, how amazing it was that everybody seemed to know each other. And I thought, this is an amazing community where they've really made this work. And I said so, and someone else reflected later and said, yes, but we all know each other, but when we go to other events, no one knows us. And so it really struck me, there's a danger that we make comfortable groupings, but we're then not disseminating out to other groupings and bringing that full network. And I loved, what I described, was it a network of multilateralism? No, networked multilateralism, which is a phrase that I love, and I'm going to steal that. Anyway, that's where we see the role of research and monitoring and dialogue through the impact coalitions coming into play. Those tools really need to drive the accountability through the system and highlight where we're off track and what's needed to deliver. Sometimes you really need to bludgeon us over the head on how often we are, because we're all quite good at looking the other way when it doesn't necessarily accord with our vision. Government, it's 8 weeks in. It is a government that is very much committed to multilateralism, and some of you may have heard our Foreign Secretary or our Prime Minister at events this week, I think, setting that out right from the top. Both multilateralism and the rule of law. They're all lawyers, my new government, you see. Pros and cons to that as a civil servant, I'll be honest. But they've come to government with a real programme of work there. And what this pact and the declarations gives us is a set of policy ideas to help steer where we're going to go with that. And so it's also a thank you from me, because in many ways you've given us that was gonna say menu, but that sounds like we're gonna pick and choose. But no, it's a program of work to go forward and to test ourselves on in the years ahead. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jackson. Just so we know, this is UNGA and we're aware if you have a hard stop at 4:30, we will finish on time. Especially at least with our speakers, others can stick around. But we will now hear 4 more government representatives, followed by Undersecretary for Policy, Guy Ryder. Please, from the mission of Nigeria, the Charge d'Affaires, Mr. Sindom and Dolu.
Thank you so very much, and thank you all of you. At least the faces are bright for all of us that have participated in the very, very hectic engagements. It's a better gathering compared to what we've been doing. But all the same, for us, from the point of view of Nigeria, the Vice President, the day before yesterday, spelled out our positions. And I'm just going to maybe re-emphasize what he has said. From the point of government, first of all, Nigeria is delighted to be here, and thank you for extending the invitation. I know you had wondered whether we were still going to be available, but here we are. Indeed, the importance of ensuring the implementation of the sustainable goals through the Pact of the Future can never be overemphasized. With widening inequalities amongst nations and most developing countries significantly behind in the implementation of the SDGs, it is imperative that we immediately back words with action and fulfill the commitments we made when we adopted the transformative action-oriented measures. So while we support the idea of holding dialogues, we do, however, believe that now is the time for action. Having sufficiently spent almost 1 year to negotiate the Pact for the Future and its annexes. So we therefore urge developed countries to fulfill, as a matter of urgency, commitments on means of implementation of the SDGs, including reform of the international financial architecture, provision of climate finance, increase in official development assistance, and reform, as has been mentioned over and over again, of the Security Council to give just representation, particularly to Africa, with full powers. When Professor talked about the US position, US has said, yes, we support expansion of the Security Council with permanent members, but without veto. But we are thinking that that is a bulldog that cannot bite. So we are interested in that. So the reform of the international financial architectures must also include review of the international debt mechanisms and adoption of a United Nations Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation for inclusivity in global tax decisions. So Nigeria, having introduced the UN resolution strengthening voluntary national reviews through country-led evaluation, adopted by the General Assembly on the 26th of April, 2023, remains an ardent supporter of the review mechanisms to evaluate and monitor implementation of the SDGs. So I will conclude by reaffirming Nigeria's unwavering commitment to the accelerated implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030, including through the Pact of the Future. And finally, just to add that as much as we are interested in the various global development issues, we are also very much interested in the security of the continent and zero it down to the West Africa region. Because for us, there is no development without peace, and there is no peace without development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Besides Maria Fernanda Espinosa, I would say Professor Mohammed Bande, many of us would agree, the father of this whole process leading up to the Summit of the Future when he was president of the General Assembly at the time of UN 75. Coming from Washington today, Ms. Narissa Cook, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State at the Bureau of International Organization Affairs, U.S. Government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And I want to thank you and the other organizers of this event for bringing us all together and also for formulating the discussion on next steps in terms of dialogue, research, and monitoring. I'm also going to start with a quote from our President Biden, which he made in his recorded remarks to the Summit of the Future. And he had said there, we are at an inflection point, and it is on all of us to meet the complex challenges of the day. As we look at next steps, we are cognizant of the need to evolve and adapt our institutions and approaches to better respond to the changing world around us. The United States is committed to creating a more effective and inclusive international system, including a more inclusive and representative UN Security Council. We have also taken steps along with other partners to evolve the multilateral development banks, including their missions and visions, their incentive structures, and their operational approaches, while also significantly increasing their lending capacity. These steps will equip these critically important institutions to address global challenges with sufficient speed and scale. A more inclusive international system also means fostering innovative multi-stakeholder coalitions and partnerships with civil society, the private sector, academics, and community leaders, among others, to better leverage all the tools and resources at our disposal. And I also want to commend Germany and the UN Development Program for putting together the Hamburg Sustainability Forum, which does bring in all these actors to identify transformative policies and investments to drive progress towards achievement of the SDGs, as well as the outcomes of the Pact for the Future. I think also the multi-year nature of the forum will help with monitoring course correction, information sharing, and success stories. Additionally, as we look at all actors, that does mean bringing in women and girls into the equation in a much bigger way. And I'm very pleased to look around this table and see the inclusion of so many women in the dialogue. Of course, the data does show that gender inclusion is clearly linked to the achievement of many goals, including economic growth, increased education levels overall, and inequalities. I think it's also important to include greater scientific research to solve global problems, and also bring in data in a much bigger way to decision-making and to monitoring and evaluation. Evolving to meet the growing challenges of the day also includes adopting new and innovative technologies and expanding digital access. And artificial intelligence, for example, can improve and advance the SDGs. But of course, we are mindful of the need to mitigate the risks. And we are committed to engaging in international AI conversations with a diverse range of partners across various regions to promote safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. And finally, nations rooted in democracy are more prosperous, more peaceful, and more just. Delivering on the 2030 agenda and the Pact for the Future requires countries to recommit to the values inscribed in UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This includes adopting policies in support of good governance, rule of law, and human rights and transparency. I'll end where I began. The Summit of the Future is a critical opportunity, but it requires all stakeholders to see themselves as part of the solution and to move beyond words to concrete action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cook. And we'll hear from two more representatives and Under Secretary General Ryder. From the government of Japan, Ambassador Yamanaka, please.
Thank you, Richard. And at the outset, I'd like to thank the organizer for hosting the roundtable in such a timely manner as to give the boost to the implementation of the Pact for the Future, Global Social Compact, and Declaration of Future Generations. And in this regard, I'd like to convey my sincere appreciation to the co-facilitators of those epoch-making documents and their teammates, including Undersecretary General Mr. Ryder, among others, and for having successfully facilitated the negotiations, despite through the twists and turns in the last lap, to produce truly action-oriented outcome documents. During the past pact negotiation, Japan consistently emphasized the importance of promoting the rule of law, human dignity, investment in the people under the principle of human security, nuclear disarmament, and non-proliferation, the UN Security Council rhythm. As our leaders declared in the pact, we will strive for a world in which well-being, security, and dignity in the healthy planet are assured for all humanity, including by addressing the challenges to the survival and the livelihood and the dignity of all people. In other words, we believe that our leaders expressed their determination to build a world where human security is properly assured for future generations of people around the world. From this perspective, we believe that it's crucial for us to find model cases of the application of a human security concept in the real world, thereby enlightening the people on its merits. To this end, I'd like to underline the importance of conducting research, monitoring, and the dialogues and the communication among multi-stakeholders around human security. In this connection, I'd like to mention that the JICA Ogata Research Institute has produced reports on human security which provide analysis and monitoring results together with quantitative data of projects aiming at enhancing human security in the field. Here, let me take one interesting study by Special Advisor for Secretary General on Human Security, Mr. Takasu, in cooperation with the JICA Institute, so as to present human security indicators for leaving no one behind by taking up a case of a local community in Japan. And this study represents a first attempt to measure people's dignity, which is of crucial importance to human security. This is also an attempt to incorporate both objective statistical data and substantive assessment of self-fulfillment, anxiety, isolation, and the social connectivity collected using a nationwide online survey. It will be very useful to share such model cases of human security application with those member states who are still cautious about the concept. And with this in mind, we will continue to hold meetings of a group of friends on the human security and invite all countries, including those cautious countries, there to deepen their understanding of the concept. To this end, we count on the expertise of the think tanks and their researchers. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Yamanaka. I know our next two speakers have a hard stop at 4:30. Over to Ambassador Sampson from the delegation of the European Union to the UN.
Thank you very much, and thank you for convening us this afternoon. I was going to say the ink is barely dry, and you're reinforcing to think about implementation. But as was said before, I think that's really good and very timely to do so. Well, maybe briefly on the process for the EU, this has been a tremendously important process to rebuild trust, not only amongst the overwhelming majority of the UN member states, but also trust in the multilateral institutions. And I think we have achieved that, but of course now we have to make this pact alive and to annexes to it. I would like to underline the importance of the civil society and the scientific and academic community in this process. And we as EU have had many meetings reaching out to those partners and hear their voices, hear their inputs, because I think if the pact is one thing, then it's not just an intergovernmental document. It is really for the world to celebrate. This is also why the EU financed partly the Nairobi Civil Society Conference. And even though we've of course heard also criticism that maybe the voices of the civil society and the academic world, the scientific world was not fully reflected, I think it was a serious attempt to at least hear and listen to the voices and definitely do pick on some of the ideas that were shared. When we look at the pact and the annexes, we are very pleased to see that they all recognize the value of scientific-based research and safe and secure data. That goes to decision-making, to planning, and I'm sure also to implementation of the documents. And now, of course, we need to ensure that continues. And again, I would call on the civil society, scientific community to also hold us accountable, because really we owe it to you to make this happen. Maybe, I mean, everybody has used quotes. I don't have a quote from the president because he just spoke and I wasn't there because I was here. But one quote that struck us was the quote of the Secretary General when he spoke at the adoption of the pact, where he said, "We have unlocked the door, and now it is our common responsibility to walk through it." And and that demands not only agreement but also action. And I think that's where we are. And the success of the pact and the annexes really depend on, of course, its implementation. And this will take time and it will take effort, but we as the EU are ready to engage. I think our first job is really to go through the pact again and list the concrete actions that we now are supposed to follow through. One of the things that we note, speaking about scientific community, is of course the establishment of the Independent International Scientific Panel on AI. Which will be very important, and we will be looking at the next steps. What does this mean in terms of reference, modalities, and of course, looking at complementarity with other such bodies, but very important to include that scientific voice also in the follow-up. So again, thanks in particular to civil society and scientific and academic community for making this happen, and again, for keeping us accountable and keep on doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Stimson, and thank you to the European Union's leadership and support of the UN Civil Society Conference in Nairobi and throughout this entire process. And to finish, we purposely wanted to have Undersecretary General Ryder share some reactions to what he's heard today, both from the government representatives as well as our lead-off speakers. We know his time is more than valuable and very short now, and we hope that whatever you're able to share with us will just be the beginning of an ongoing discussion. Thank you once again for your leadership of this process leading up to the past week's summit, please.
Well, thanks very much, Richard. And let me try and be fairly quick in what I have to say. And I know the idea now is to look forwards, but just a minute on just looking back about at what happened in recent days, weeks. Firstly, from the very outset of the preparation of this summit, it was the Secretary General's expressed commitment to make this an inclusive process, to benefit from the involvement of civil society and other stakeholders. And although it's others who can judge better than I think we upheld that commitment at the Nairobi conference, at all of the events, Dan, that you and the coalition have helped us to take part in, the fantastic action days that we had on Friday afternoon and Saturday. We're still counting the numbers, but it could be as many as 10,000 activists came to the UN in those days. And I think it was a tremendously important facet of the summit. It's almost as if the journey to the summit, the shared experience was a value in and of itself, independently of the value of the pact and the compact and the declaration. And we have to take that forward. That's the first thing to say. Secondly, I follow Ambassador Kozende when you say the fact that our member states were able to arrive at a consensus on a document of some importance in our current circumstances is of itself an achievement which deserves noting and should be a source of encouragement as we go forward. And that takes me to substance. I think we do have documents which are meaningful. These are not just generalities. These are not just a repetition of previously agreed language. They do represent, in some cases, new approaches to long-standing challenges, and also that's also approaches we need to new and emerging challenges. I think we've combined those two facets rather well. But the question is, what happens next? So I was going to use the same quote as my colleague from the European Union about what the Secretary General said about doors. There are lots of windows and doors and points of inflection and crossroads. It was quite confusing. When the Secretary General came off the platform when we finished the summit, he sort of said, come here. And I was going to say, well done or very good. No, he said, now it's implementation time. I thought he might have left it for a day or two, but now we've got to get on with that. And that is the key message. That truly is the key message. Let me tell you that in the system, in the Secretariat, we're getting organized. We are filleting the 3 documents and working out how we're going to take it forward inside. But of course, so much depends on member states and those who accompany us in the process. I have been encouraged in the immediate aftermath of this summit. The very evening that the summit closed, the Secretary General was in with the President of the World Bank, with the Managing Director of the IMF, with the leaders of the regional banks, talking about the financial architecture. And there was common purpose in the room. It was from their side, thanks, congratulations, let's get on with it. And then yesterday morning, I sat in Brazil presidency of the G20 foreign ministerial meeting, where there was a very clear, I hope I'm speaking accurately, Ambassador, very clear interest in building on the momentum of the summit in areas such as Security Council reform, IFA reform, but much else as well. We just heard from the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Group of Friends on Future Generations. We'll be going to Hamburg in the UN system. Our high-level committee on programs will be meeting in Madrid in 2 weeks' time. So the momentum is there. We have to keep it going. Can I appeal to civil society to stay the course? You've 16 meetings on the road to the summit. Maybe there's a lot more meetings on the road forward from the summit. I like this sort of triptych of dialogue, research, monitoring. Keep us honest. Hold member states accountable for what they decided. And I also agree that 1 year from now, we'll be able to judge the merits, the value of the summit better than we are today. Because yes, there's a feeling of achievement, but the world hasn't changed as a simple consequence of the adoption of these documents. It might just change a bit if we take those documents seriously and act upon. I can assure you that the Secretary General is very, very clear on our responsibilities in the Secretariat to work with you to make that happen. So it's a big thanks to our co-facilitators. Thank you, Dan, to all of your colleagues. The coalition has probably taken us a step forward to creating the UN that we want, that we need. For that, big thanks.
Thank you so much, Under Secretary General Guy Ryder, and your team for all of the support that you've provided. I'm jumping in here for a very quick closing. I realize that we've all got places to go, because my wonderful boss here go to questions and make this more interactive, but I think we've all been jotting down notes. This has been a really helpful bit of a debrief discussion for many of us. Thank you to our friends and allies, Coalition for the UN We Need, co-chair, our Global Governance Innovation Network partners, everyone who's really helped make much of the mobilization from civil society around the table possible. To the member states who, when we say, we know you just agreed on this pact, but show up again and tell us what you think, who continue to show up and support civil society in many, many ways. I think a common theme that we've heard throughout the discussions both towards the summit and afterwards has been the relationships that we've created, the networks that we've formed, the conversations that we've had, and the ways of working we've started to create between the UN system, between civil society, between member states, between other stakeholder groups has been one of the most valuable parts of this process. That is going to be so crucial for us as we move forward. We hope those relationships continue. The summit was a forcing mechanism that brought us all together, but I think it's going to be really important for us to continue working together on the road through the summit of the future. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you once again.